For years earlier, Emily and Daniel had exchanged their heartfelt promises in a modest ceremony, embarking on their shared journey in a tiny single-room apartment nestled on the city's outskirts. The cramped space, though humble, buzzed with their dreams and aspirations. As time unfolded, their circumstances improved, allowing them to settle into a more spacious apartment, a symbol of their growing stability. Around that period, Daniel's parents, yearning for tranquility and open spaces, relocated to a rural haven, entrusting their son with the family's city residence. Emily, whose career demanded unpredictable hours and frequent weekend shifts, was rarely one to linger idly at home. When not working, she'd be found sweating it out at the fitness center or savoring coffee with close companions. Their life together flowed smoothly, almost effortlessly, with a quiet harmony that seemed unbreakable, until a seemingly mundane morning disrupted the cadence of their existence. It was an ordinary day when they prepared to leave for their respective routines. As they stepped outside, a sleek, unfamiliar car blocked their driveway, its polished surface gleaming under the morning sun. "At least they left a note," Daniel grumbled, spotting a slip of paper wedged beneath the windshield wiper. He checked his watch, impatience creeping in, and quickly dialed the number scrawled on the note. Moments later, a young man, likely in his early 20s and sporting a college sweatshirt, jogged out from the neighboring property. He moved the car with a sheepish apology, then approached them, slightly out of breath. "Terrible way to meet, I know," he said with a nervous chuckle. "I just moved in next door. I'm Lucas." Daniel, eager to stay on schedule, offered a curt nod, introduced himself and Emily, and slid into their car. Emily, however, lingered a moment longer, her gaze fixed on Lucas. He caught her look and flashed a subtle, knowing smile, as if he sensed their paths would cross again. Weeks drifted by, perhaps even months, and life resumed its familiar rhythm. But then a peculiar shift emerged. Emily, once vibrant and always on the move during her days off, began staying home more often. When Daniel inquired, she'd shrug, claiming her job's demands had left her drained, and she preferred the comfort of their couch, a cozy blanket, and a film. Each evening, when Daniel returned from work, there she was, waiting as if glued to their apartment. This new pattern held steady until an unexpected event broke the routine. One afternoon, a sudden power outage struck Daniel's workplace, halting operations and sending everyone home hours early. He arrived at their apartment a full 4 hours ahead of schedule, keys jangling as he unlocked the door. The moment he stepped inside, Emily darted into the hallway, her eyes wide with a startled expression, as if she'd been caught off guard. Her voice trembled slightly as she bombarded him with questions. "Was everything all right? What happened?" Her smile tight and unnatural. Daniel calmly explained the blackout, but Emily's posture remained tense, her unease palpable. Before he could process her reaction, the doorbell chimed. Daniel, still in his coat, instinctively opened the door. There stood Lucas, but his usual easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by a hesitant, almost guarded expression. He seemed surprised to see Daniel, as if he'd expected someone else. "What's up?" Daniel asked, his tone edged with curiosity. Lucas faltered, stammering, I just needed." His words trailed off as Emily interjected, her voice unnaturally bright. "Out of sugar again," she exclaimed with a forced laugh. "Hang on, I'll grab some." She hurried to the kitchen, retrieved a small container of sugar, and thrust it into Lucas's hands with an exaggerated smile. "Thanks for dropping by." Lucas mumbled something incoherent, gave a quick nod, and retreated to his apartment next door. Daniel watched him go, one eyebrow arched. "What was that? You running a pantry for the neighborhood now?" he teased, half joking. Emily laughed it off, her response quick and dismissive. "Oh please. I was baking a pie the other day, and the aroma must have wafted out. Bumped into him by the mailboxes, and he asked for the recipe. Guess he's struggling with it." Before Daniel could probe further, she deftly changed the subject. "Speaking of, when are you going to fix that wobbly shelf in the bedroom?" she asked, her tone casual, as if the encounter had been utterly trivial. The moment passed, and Lucas seemed to vanish from their lives. Daniel pushed the odd interaction to the back of his mind, and their days settled back into their usual groove. But then came another afternoon that stirred unease. Daniel arrived home just as Emily was walking through the door, even though it was her day off. "Where have you been?" he asked, his tone light but curious. "Just taking out the garbage," she replied, her eyes briefly avoiding his. "Been here all day otherwise." Daniel said nothing, but his attention shifted to the bedroom shelf she'd mentioned before, its loose hinge still untouched. "Time to deal with this," he muttered, grabbing his toolbox and diving into the task. As he worked, completely absorbed, he remembered he needed to check in with a coworker about an urgent project. "Hey, what's the time?" he called out, not looking up. Emily, standing nearby, seemed lost in thought, her gaze distant. It took her a moment to register his question. When he glanced at her, she blinked, startled, and turned to check the clock, only to look at the wrong wall. In their apartment, where they'd lived for years, the clock hung on the opposite side. She spun around, her face etched with confusion, as if disoriented. The misstep was small but jarring. How could she forget something so familiar, especially when she claimed to spend so much time at home? That moment gnawed at Daniel. Emily's behavior, her sudden homebody tendencies, her vague explanations about her whereabouts, felt increasingly off. A seed of doubt took root, and he couldn't shake the suspicion that she was concealing something. So when her next day off approached, Daniel quietly arranged to leave work early. Around noon, he returned home unannounced. The apartment was silent, empty. Emily, who had insisted she'd be lounging at home all day, was nowhere to be found. His heart raced, and almost instinctively, his thoughts turned to Lucas. The young neighbor had faded from his mind until that moment, but now his presence loomed large. Without hesitation, Daniel climbed the stairs to Lucas's apartment and pressed the doorbell. He waited, hearing faint movement inside. Someone was definitely there, but no one answered. He rang again, then again, his frustration mounting. Pulling out his phone, he dialed Emily's number. Before the first ring could complete, a familiar chime echoed from within Lucas's apartment. Her ringtone, unmistakable and damning. Anger surged through Daniel. "No point hiding, open the door," he called out, his voice sharp. After a tense pause, the door slowly opened. Lucas stood there, pale and disheveled, his expression a mix of guilt and dread. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Is she in there?" he demanded, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. The apartment's layout mirrored their own, but one detail stood out. The living room clock hung on the opposite wall from theirs. That small difference hit him like a revelation. Emily's confusion about the clock at home hadn't been a lapse in memory. It was the result of spending so much time here, in this mirrored space, that she'd blurred the two. Daniel moved forward, his steps deliberate, and found Emily in the living room, curled up on the couch. Her face was buried in her hands, her shirt misbuttoned and inside out, as if she'd dressed in a frantic rush. She didn't look up as he approached. He stood there, his emotions tightly controlled. "It's done," he said, his voice steady but resolute. "I won't argue, I won't shout, but this is the end. Go home. Pack your things." Emily slowly raised her head, her eyes brimming with desperation, as if she wanted to plead or explain. But the steel in Daniel's gaze silenced her. She turned to Lucas, searching for some shred of support, a word or gesture to anchor her in the chaos she'd unleashed. But Lucas only shook his head, a silent refusal to intervene. That small gesture cut deeper than any words could. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she stood, her steps heavy, and returned to the apartment that no longer felt like hers. She packed her belongings in silence, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. With nowhere else to go, she left, the door closing softly behind her. The affair, once cloaked in excitement and secrecy, had unraveled over something as trivial as a misplaced clock, a careless slip that exposed everything. Daniel filed for divorce without delay, his heart hardened by betrayal. Emily, meanwhile, drifted through the months that followed, bouncing between friends' spare rooms before settling into a cramped, shared apartment. Surrounded by new neighbors, men she had no interest in, she found herself trapped in a life she'd never envisioned. As she reflected, her grief wasn't for the fleeting passion of the affair, but for the quiet, steady companionship she'd once shared with Daniel. She mourned the comfort of their routines, the unspoken understanding that had defined their days. In the end, she realized too late that love wasn't about fleeting thrills. It was the peace she'd taken for granted, now lost forever.